Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about field guides and their use in learning avian taxonomy. When people ask for my recommendations for field guides, I tend to recommend the Sibley field guides. This is an older version of the Sibley Guide to Birds of the West, but the current version is great and it's more updated in its taxonomy. There are a variety of other guides out there as well that I'll be looking at a couple in this video. There are a lot of great apps now on phones for bird identification. Some are free, some cost money. I have one on my phone called iBird Pro. It costs some money. It's pretty comprehensive and useful, has a lot of good recordings of sounds. The thing that the apps are not so great at is really helping a person learn their bird taxonomy. And when you're trying to learn ornithology, understanding the classification of birds really helps both with identification and really understanding the different behaviors and the different environments and the different ways you see birds exist in the world. Hard copy field guides are still very, very useful for that, in part because they're this physical representation of how birds are organized in terms of their evolutionary history. Now, there are other types of field guides out there that will organize birds either by their size or their prominent coloration or some other feature that has you looking at groups that are birds that are not closely related to each other. But your Sibley guides, the Peterson guides, and I have some older guides like this National Geographic guide are all arranged taxonomically. Depending on how old they are, the organization is going to be slightly different, because we've learned more about the relationships of birds over the past years. But a lot of that structure is still very similar. So this is one of my favorite things to do with a field guide when I'm first starting to work with students. Take your field guide and put your name on it. No, actually take your field guide, okay, and open it up at what you think is exactly the middle. And I'm just going to put my fingers in here. Really try to be careful and look and see at what I think is exactly, that looks almost like exactly the middle. Okay, what do you see? In this case, it's owls. And so I always try to guess what it's going to be. And sometimes I guess owls, sometimes I guess pigeons. But often, if you take a field guide and you open it up right in the middle and it's arranged taxonomically, you're going to be somewhere in this region where you're seeing owls. If I flip ahead, back a few pages, I actually do get pigeons. So depending on what I decide is the halfway point, and then in the other direction a few pages, and I'm looking at trogons and kingfishers. No matter where you are in the world just about, and no matter how large or small your field guide is, you can open up, if it's taxonomically arranged, at the halfway point, at the first quarter point, at the last quarter point, and see similar groups, major taxonomic groups of birds in those field guides. Here is an older one for all the birds of North America. It's a nice field guide. It's a bit outdated at this point, and it's as small as the Sibley Guide to the Birds of the West because it doesn't have quite as many illustrations in it. That's why I recommend the Sibley Guides, because they demonstrate geographic variation as well as variation that you might see in the appearance of birds with age or sex quite well. But if I take this guide and do the same thing, divide it up at about the halfway point, look, I'm at owls again. And so that's pretty amazing. I'll do this one more time and then we'll talk a little bit more about the way that these are arranged. Here's a very large Sibley Guide to birds of all of North America north of Mexico. Okay, I think it is. Maybe it includes Mexico. I can't remember. But I'm going to divide it in half again. I promise I did not rehearse this. So it's pretty fun. You should try it if you're at a library or a bookstore and you see a few field guides. Now, I'm going to go back to this Western book, but if you look at the early part of the field guide, just the first several pages, for example, of bird accounts, species accounts, you're going to, in more recent guides, be looking at ducks. If you're looking at North America, you'll be looking at ducks and geese. And if you turn towards the back, in fact, towards the back 2/3 of the book, You'll be looking at perching birds or songbirds, birds in the order Passeriformes. And this gives us an insight into the taxonomic information. And although birds in different groups can inhabit a wide variety of habitats, we do see that a lot of our lineages of birds that split off earlier are associated with aquatic environments. And then we have birds that are more in forested and terrestrial environments appearing later. And then in the middle, you see a pretty broad variety of bird types. But no matter where you go, you can do this trick. So the major orders of birds, it's important to know that the birds you observe, what taxonomic grouping you're going to prominently see will depend on your habitat. If you're at a swamp or a marsh or a pond or an ocean environment, you're probably going to be mostly seeing ducks or herons or shorebirds and gulls, okay? If you're in terrestrial environments such as grasslands or forests, the vast majority of the birds are going to be in the order Passeriformes. And in fact, even though it's a single order of bird, it accounts for, in terms of species richness, about half of the bird species. And so understanding these taxonomic relationships can help you actually when you're out there in the field deciding what part of the field guide to be thumbing through. All right, a little more on bird taxonomic relationships in other videos.